Thank you very, very much. Give it a long evening. Please sit down. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. My name is Joe Biden. I'm Janie Castle's good friend. That's Mike's wife. She was a child when I met her and knew her family, and still do. She comes from a fine family. Delaware has done an awful lot of good, and best thing that ever happened to Mike was Janie. And the truth is, and it's not an exaggeration, John Porter gets it. He understands it. Speaking of integrity, there's a man of enormous integrity, John, and I tell you, there's still folks up there in the Hill, no matter how cynical people are about the process, who possess that same integrity. And I think we're going to see more and more people standing up on a whole lot of things. But Michael and I, we go back to the days. Michael was a hell of an athlete in high school. I wasn't a bad athlete. We actually played in a touch football league, an industrial league together. Problem was, we both had such bad tempers, we decided we had to stop playing for our political futures to last. But Mike is one of the most beloved figures in the state of Delaware, and I say that without fear of contradiction. And it is true that all the years that I've served since 1972 as a 29-year-old kid, and I think Mike was 30, 31 years old, but everything from being a state senator, lieutenant governor, congressperson. I used to say, as we Catholics say, novenas every election year, that Mike would decide not to run for the Senate. But I really mean this. There is a Delaware way. There has never been one single time, not one single time, and we are both partisans. We both care a great deal about the positions of our party, but not one single time has there been a harsh word in public or private between Mike Castle and me, and for that matter, Mike Castle, Bill Roth, and me at the same time. So I tell you what, folks, it is Mike. This year, three strange things have happened to me. I've gotten 3 awards. One from the University of Notre Dame, one from, I think it's Allegheny College, and one from the bipartisan group that Bob Dole and George Mitchell put together for being bipartisan. I thought that's what we were supposed to be. No, I really mean this. I really genuinely mean it. The idea that Notre Dame would say Joe Biden and John Boehner, they actually get along, so we should give them an award. John McCain and I, who have shouting matches with one another, but if I got a phone call right now and he said, Joe, you got to get in the plane and fly to such and such a place, I can't tell you why, he'd know I'd get in the plane and do it. He would for me, too. And he and I were the honorees. And then the other night. So there's something really wrong with what we've allowed to have happen here. I have a... And one of the men who I've worked with closely ever since he came to the Congress, to the Senate, was Lamar Alexander, speaking of men of integrity. The fact of the matter is that, there are still people like Lamar in the Senate who believe that the federal government has a role in championing research. He's a good friend, and we need him, and we owe him. And thank God he is still going to be there. And Kathy Bates, I told Kathy, I'm a fan, Kathy, and you're my favorite of your movies. I know you got a lot of accolades, is Fried Green Tomatoes. Remember the line? Face it, girls, I'm older and I have more insurance. Remember when she moved that car out? Well, you could have also said, Kathy, I'm smarter and I'm more effective too. Because I'm sorry you have a personal struggle at the same time, but what you're doing matters a great, great deal. And Tony Fauci, what an honor to be on the stage with Tony. Everybody knows his work in HIV and AIDS, but let me tell you, in my time as vice president, I sat with the president and Tony, and it was always in moments of crisis, genuine international health crises. And Tony Fauci is the person we turned to. But for Tony, it's not at all improbable that we would have had a pandemic as a consequence of Ebola. He not only organized the United States, he organized the world. No, not hyperbole, the world, in taking on this dreaded, dreaded, dreaded disease. And then Lee Hartwell, your decade-long leadership at the Hutch. When I did the moonshot that past year, I got to go to every major research center, cancer research center in the country, actually most in the world. And what they do at the Hutch has been absolutely mind-blowing. And but for you, Doc, I don't think it would have ever reached the premier status it has today. And now, I don't know, everybody seems to go to Arizona. I don't know what the hell is going on in Arizona, but except the weather, and John McCain. But all you're doing is, it still matters a lot. And to be honored along with a Nobel laureate like Phil Sharp, a genuine pioneer in genetics, blazing a path for so many to follow. Your work with Stand Up to Cancer has been absolutely crucial and important, not only in terms of the money it raises, but what it does to convince the American people that there is hope. All of you, I'll bet you there's probably not one of you out there hasn't been diagnosed, had a friend diagnosed, or a family member diagnosed with cancer. You know, the one thing that happens when that occurs is that dread, that fear, and there's an overwhelming need for hope, and to convince the American people that if we make the effort, we can continue to make progress. It used to be when Mike and I were coming up in politics, and John, there was this notion that American science and technology puts their mind that there's nothing we cannot do. Well, that is not so easily given today. It's still true, but it's surprising the American public doesn't respond with that sense of certainty and belief that our generation has. And that's why it's so important we work on all of these issues, including lupus and all of the diseases that so fundamentally affect the health and well-being of the people, not only in America, but the United States, not only the United States of America, but the world. And the Lupus Foundation is being honored here tonight for their advocacy and their work investing in promising studies that can save lives, including developing one of the first diagnostic tests specifically for lupus. You're leading by making incredible progress. I can't say that a year ago I thought I'd be in this position. I, like so many of you, became my mom used to have an expression. Mike knew my mom. She was a wonderful old Irish lady who was at a backbone like a ramrod, but was everybody's mom, right, Janie? My mom used to say, a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing. Well, when you have someone you love and you adore is diagnosed with whatever the disease is or whatever the problem is, you try to, whether it's a health problem or otherwise, you try to learn all there is about the problem facing that person you adore, and you try to figure if there's anything you can do to be of assistance. Well, I got engaged and although I was generally aware, I didn't become aware like so many. This is not about my bow. I really mean this. It's not about my bow, but I was explaining how I got so deeply engaged. And I realized that when Bo was diagnosed with stage 4 glioblastoma of the brain, that we knew that wasn't much more than not many people make it. Matter of fact, the percentages are not measurable, as the doc can tell you, heads up NIH. But I tried to learn as much as I could, and I realized that 5 years before my son was diagnosed, an awful lot of the disciplines working on cancer in particular weren't working together. The immunotherapist they were sort of a voodoo science that had a brief awakening at the turn of the 20th century and then was jettisoned for such a long, long time. Virology, biological engineers, chemical engineers, not only the people you'd expect to be engaged, but one of the leading geneticists in the world is with us here tonight. And all these folks all began to work together and collaborate in ways that hadn't occurred before. When Richard Nixon declared the war on cancer in 1971, he had no army. He had no, how can I say it? He had no weapons. And at the time, Mike, they thought there was one cancer, one type of cancer that resided in different parts of the body. And there was no need to share. There was no need to collaborate because the medical model was Jonas Salk in the library, in the laboratory, finding the silver bullet. Hospitals didn't share because they had no ability to share info even if they wanted to share. But here we are 45 years later when the moonshot came about. And 45 years later, we've learned a great deal. We've spent billions of dollars in funding, training scientists, physicians, treating millions of patients. Now we have an army. We have powerful new technologies and tools like immunotherapy that makes cancer cells visible to the immune system so our natural defenses can actually destroy the cancer. Surgeons using cutting-edge robotics to allow for far more precise imaging to find the cancer and more precise surgery to remove hard-to-reach cancers. Liquid biopsies that have so much promise as well, that, speaking of the Hutch, that to find early stages of cancer in the blood. So you can chart the path, stop it in its tracks. These advances provide hope, and precise medicines and diagnostics might greatly improve our ability to detect and defeat cancer. But on so many levels, we've now reached, as I said, this inflection point. We all understand that there's more opportunity, but this opportunity comes with great responsibility. And so the moonshot was fundamentally, I decided to make it about, and by the way, that wasn't planned. When I announced that I wasn't going to run for president, which gave a sigh of relief to millions of Americans, in the Rose Garden, I said, and it was, Mike knows, he'll the only one who will know this for certain. It wasn't scripted, Mike. I said, I knew I was going to be asked if I had any regrets, and I said, I have one regret, that I wouldn't get to be the president to preside over ending cancer as we know it, because I'm that optimistic about what's going to happen. And so the president came along without my knowing it. He was in the Rose Garden with me when I said that, and at the State of the Union announced that we were going to have a cancer moonshot. He never told me about it. No, not a joke. He never mentioned it to me, and said I was going to be mission control. And that's when I first learned I was going to have this opportunity. But one of the great things, and I told this to Mike Pence, and I mean it sincerely, the relationship you want to have with the president, when he gives you the assignment, it's yours and he doesn't double check it. I mean that sincerely. One of the great things about our partnership has been the minor role I played, but the role I played when they gave me an assignment, I had authority. So as the head of NIH can tell you, I had the power to hire and fire. I had the power, not a joke. Everybody knew whatever I said when I gathered the entire team together was that was it. And if it wasn't, go see the president. Go see the president. And with the help of the brilliant folks that we have at the federal level, we decided to sit down and say, what impediments could we move and get out of the way to break down silos that existed unintentionally? Because again, going back to Nixon, when they set the system up 45 years ago, even though we've learned so much since then, they set up a system, Mike, that was designed institutionally for not sharing. It wasn't intended, and all the docs are going to get mad, but the culture of medicine needs a significant kick in the ass. Excuse my French. In terms of sharing. But it wasn't intended. It wasn't intended. As I said, there was nothing to share. But what we did was, the president gave me authority, and I went to Dr. Collins, who's one of the great minds in this field, and I said, look, who should we pull together? So we brought together everybody in the administration in this task force that had anything to do with cancer. And I think a couple of them were surprised when I said, well, I want to add NASA to that. I want to add the Department of Energy to that. And they looked at me like I was crazy some. But NASA's forgotten more about radiation than any other department knows. So there's new experiments going on now at NASA to find better ways. Protons may not work, may work, to be able to more precisely target and do less damage. And so what we did was we injected an urgency with the leadership of Dr. Collins and others, an urgency of now into this fight to double the rate of progress. There's some clinicians out there There are some of you folks who have treated these patients, whether it's cancer or any other life-threatening disease. And how many times have you heard your patients say to you, "Doc, I know you can't cure me, but can you just give me one more month? I want to see her married, Doc. I want to see her married. I want to, just give me one more month." Or, "Doc, this is my first grandbaby. Can you just give me a couple more weeks? Just a couple more weeks. I'm not asking you to let me live. Just give me a little more time." If we break down a lot of these barriers, even if we didn't make one single new breakthrough, we can give people more time. We can collaborate more. And we can change the culture that was a culture of medicine and cancer that was designed for 1971. And we can set up a new strategy not to fight the last war, but this war. And we made some progress, significant progress. Too many actions and collaborations to describe, as Mike made reference to some of them, and our host did as well. For example, we set up this thing that everybody said, okay, well, by the way, we can do now 1,000,000 billion calculations per second. Hear me? 1,000,000 billion calculations per second. Imagine if you're able to have in one place the cancer genomes sequenced for 1,000,000 patients. What patterns you could find. The two Nobel laureates involved tonight, it would take 10 of them 20 years to be able to do what could be done in 20 minutes in terms of finding patterns. Why is it that the same diagnosis, we now have over 200 cancers we've specifically identified requiring different therapies? Wouldn't it be nice to know that the first therapy that is tried has the best chance of working? So a lot of people stepped up. IBM gave a call and said, "You want Watson?" Not a joke. Largest hospital in the world, the VA. You can get your cancer sequenced, genome sequenced there as well as anywhere in the world. You can do it quickly. And now what happens is you get the exact cancer you have, plug it into Watson. Watson's read everything there's ever been written or said about cancer and can instantaneously give you the 2, 3, 5 therapies that have been used and worked and not worked on that particular cancer. I got a call from Amazon. "You're going to need a lot more space in the cloud for what you're doing. We'll make it all available, and we'll make it available for free." Things you would think that those of you who are businesswomen and men who can pick up your smartphone and find out not only what movie's playing in any city and theater in America, when your last check was written, whether or not it was cashed, what banks are available to you, and where your kid is. And you can't do something similar in knowing where all of the tests being conducted on various cancers are taking place in America? Drug companies, they get a bad rap. They deserve some of it, by the way, but they're pretty damn good. They don't have enough people to do trials. They can't find where all the people are that qualify for the trials for their particular medicine are. Only 4% of all the people who are diagnosed with cancer ever get into a trial. You have great oncologists in Bemidji, Minnesota, or Smyrna, Delaware. They have no idea how to find where their patient may qualify. So we went to a group that the president put together. They're called the Technology Fellows. They're mostly young people in their late 30s and 40s out of Silicon Valley. And I said, "Can you put together?" I went to Megan. I said, "Can you put together a website?" You can go to one website now. They did it in 3 weeks. Find out every single solitary cancer trial going on near you and in the United States of America. Things we thought, again, it's not anybody's fault. but we're operating by a set of, constraints that existed in 1972. And so I'll give you one last example. This task force came along and recommended that we set up right now there's the Cancer Genome Atlas, and it makes up roughly 14,000 individuals. So we decided to set up, with the leadership of the folks at NIH and others, the National Cancer Institute Genomic Data Commons at the University of Chicago. And there was 14,000 individuals. The database has continued to grow. Now there are over 30,000 individuals. And our international agreements, I was able to negotiate 8 agreements with 8 different countries on sharing data, all within the last year, from China and Japan, Korea, Jordan, Abu Dhabi. I mean, it's just across the board. And so what we have now is, this is where Amazon came in and said, look, you're going to get an awful lot of this data flowing in. So now there are 30,000 individuals. There will be more. And just so you know, just since this was set up in June, the data has already been accessed. It's open to everyone. Anyone can access the data. It has been accessed more than 80 million times. 80 million times. Say it again, 80 million times. So folks, we're increasing the chances exponentially that we're going to find some more answers. And so there's much more. I'm going on too long. There are 4 more examples they suggested I give you. I'm not going to give you any of them to save your... But the other thing I want to mention is that with all the progress we made over the last year, including the actions and partnerships of over 80 private sector organizations created around the moonshot, the lasting impact that occurred this past year was the 21st Century Cures Act. It ranks among the most important things we're able to do. The moonshot did not do that. It was part of it. Because of the tireless efforts of many in this room, as well as this organization, and we were able to succeed. I was saying to Francis Collins earlier, we were just talking, and everybody, and he said, I remember when you told us we're going to get this done. We all looked at you like you were crazy. Folks, there's one bipartisan thing left in America: cancer. No, not a joke. Not a joke. And we have some really, really, really responsible, informed, and persuasive leaders in the Republican Party, like Fred Upton. We have folks in the Democratic Party like Patty Murray and Congresswoman DeGette. And we were told at the very end, the Congress not willing to spend any money, at the very end, with only weeks left, Mike, went up on the Hill and did what you and I would often do. I said, look, I've not asked you guys for a damn thing. Do this. We need it. We were told we couldn't have any chance. We got over 380-some votes in the House. And we got, I think, 88 or whatever it was in the Senate. Overwhelming support. Because they all know. I've been around so long, I remember Barry Goldwater, as he used to say, in your heart, you know I'm right. In your heart, they knew it's the right thing to do. It's something the United States government should be engaged in. Private philanthropy is critically important, but the bulk of the money is federal money. Billions of dollars. And it generates the kind of commitment that comes from the private sector, which we couldn't do without. The Act provides $6.3 billion in biomedical and health-related research, including $1.8 billion for cancer research, to invest in research as part of the moonshot. But we need to continue to communicate the importance of this work. One of the things that all the Republicans and Democrats who led this fight, and I just was along for the ride, led this fight, what they know is, the American people know, if they want the government spending their money, this is one of the things they want their spending their money on. But they want to know it's being spent wisely. They want to know it's being spent wisely. Not whether it should be spent, it's just being spent wisely. So, When I began this effort, I'd say to my staff and every agency in the federal government, as Francis and others will tell you, and Tony, involved in this fight, to meet our goal, we have to include average citizens. Let them know exactly what we're doing, what's working, what's not, how they can participate. I used to drive my staff crazy, and I still do, when I'd say, speak plain English to me, not as opposed to Spanish, as opposed to complicated. Speak plainly. Whether it's a licensed plumber or a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, this is complicated stuff. No one knows it unless it can be explained straightforwardly. And so it's on us to explain to the American people why our goals are so important, why they're real and relevant to their lives and to their loved ones. And if we do, the American public is going to continue to overwhelmingly support our efforts, including federal investment in research. As this audience knows better than anyone, it's not that they've doubted that the federal government had a role to play, but they want to be sure we're investing their tax dollars effectively. We owe it to them to show it's working. You know how important this is. Your survey done by this operation shows that greater than 60% of the American people believe that federal investment in basic research is critical. And the more than half of Americans would even be willing to pay more in taxes if that money could be spent on medical research. That's remarkable, but also presents an enormous opportunity, in turn, to save the government tens of billions of dollars if we make progress in some of these intractable diseases. But I think it's because the American people believe what I've come to know as well, that we are on the cusp of a major breakthrough and progress. This is not the time to let up. This is the time to redouble our efforts. And like all of you in this room, this is like, as they say back home, preaching to the choir. I want to assure you that I'm not going anywhere, nor are any of the people who have been engaged so far. With the encouragement of some of the leading experts in the country, like Eric Lander, the Broad Institute at MIT and Harvard, David Agus, who heads up USC's Lawrence E. Ellison Institute of Transformative Medicine, Kim Theobald. I mean, there's a whole lot of people, CEOs from biopharmaceutical companies and presidents of cancer centers. To my great surprise, they've come to me. We've met for 5 days. They want me to set up a Biden initiative, not because I know anything as much as they know, but because they think that if we continue to keep this front and center in front of the American people and speak plainly to them, explain what we're doing, why it's important, that we can continue to break down the barriers that have existed, making it very difficult for us to make the kind of progress that is in our hands right now. With the input from those and other experts, starting very soon, we're going to launch an organization called the Biden Cancer Initiative. It just happens to carry my name. It has all of them behind it, with similar goals of the moonshot. Changing the way we do business in cancer research and development, and providing cancer care, and focusing on breaking down the silos, increasing collaboration. And again, we've already had an overwhelming response. This initiative will focus on, one, improving data standards and giving patients mechanisms to share their data so they can help other patients going through the same facts, so researchers can use that data to find new patterns and new answers. I don't know how many times at the outset of my effort I was told by some of the leading docs around the country in the cancer, well, patients don't want to share their data. I won't mention where I was in one of the great hospitals and discussing this, and this doc was saying this, and the press was following us. He was showing us around. And Mike will be shocked I did this, but I turned to the press. I said, Doc, I'll make you a bet. If I ask their CEOs to give me 15 minutes of free prime time to talk about cancer, I'll bet they'll give it to me. And Doc, I'll make you a bet now. If I go in the air and pick one repository of all the information and I say to patients, send your information, it will be kept private, to the following place, I'll bet you I have between 2 and 4 million people the next morning This particular doctor turned white because he knew I wasn't going to recommend his place. You think I'm joking? I am not joking. I've never met a patient who doesn't want to share their data to help other people. I've not met one, and I've met tens of thousands over the last years. So look, working in the community care organizations to help improve access of care and quality of care, so outcomes aren't wholly decided by your zip code. Convening a national conversation with pharmaceutical companies, insurers, biotech companies, and others to ensure patients can access treatment they need. Too many Americans are forced to make very draconian decisions about bankruptcy of their homes just so their loved ones can get the care they hope for. Or they delay the needed treatment so it's too late. We all know in almost every cancer, early detection makes a great deal of difference. We're going to be calling for greater transparency and access to clinical trials so more patients can get access to treatment that might work for their cancer. We're going to continue to work for cultural changes and improvements in our cancer research system so we can make the best use of today's opportunities to generate, share, and use data from patients and researchers to help patients everywhere around the world. The reasons I said I stay involved is because for the first time in 45 years, there's some real movement and collaboration between cancer centers, drug companies, insurance industries, government, where the solution lies, that combination. And so let me conclude by saying that I'm optimistic. We can do this. I don't want to argue about will we cure cancer. That's a different argument. But one thing I know for sure, we can cure some cancers, and we can make many more chronic diseases that don't cost you your life, but only if we break down the barriers and cooperate more. I see the day when a patient gets the right therapy the first time they get their diagnosis. I see the day when prevention is more effective and where care is personalized and more effective with less harmful side effects. I see the day when those of you in this room, when you take your children or grandchildren for their school physical, they'll get vaccinated against certain cancers like they can now get vaccinated against HPV. There will be a litany of vaccinations to prevent the cancer from happening. As I said, one of your honorees tonight, a Nobel laureate, ask them what they're doing at the Hutch and other places in terms of blood biopsies. The promise, the potential is enormous, enormous. I see the day when we'll be able to identify through markers in the blood cancers that haven't yet developed, or to catch cancer when it's most treatable, identifying early signals of cancer in the blood from biological fragments shed from the cancer cell itself. This is within our power. It's in our grasp. And one thing I can tell you, there is hope. I'm willing to bet everyone in this room that's had cancer, a loved one who's had cancer, they understand what the feeling's like when the doctor says it's cancer. And the one thing, no matter how bleak it looks, the one thing that makes it mildly bearable is hope. 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 You know, when President Kennedy decided to send humankind to the moon, most of you can probably from grade school and high school recite portions of the speech. He talked about the one part that most meaningful to me was he said, this was a commitment, his quote was, this was a commitment to go to the moon that the nation was, quote, unwilling to postpone. It was a commitment that we were unwilling to postpone as a people. In this fight against cancer, we must, and other dreaded diseases, I'm speaking only of cancer now, but it applies to others. We must be unwilling to postpone. Not for a day, not for a minute. The most brilliant people I've met in my career. I'm doing it a long time. I'm supposedly an expert on foreign policy. An expert, as my dad would say, anyone from out of town with a briefcase. I don't have a briefcase. I'll conclude by giving you one example of how ubiquitous this problem is and the overwhelming desire for cooperation. We had the nuclear proliferation summit at the White House a year ago. We had 50 heads of state, Michael, in the East Room, the big room where the press conferences were held. There were rectangular tables set end to end all the way around that magnificent room with 50 heads of state. The president was sitting in front of the fireplace. I was directly across him with my back to that grand hallway. And here's what the president said. He said, I know a lot of you want to talk to Joe about cancer. He was deadly earnest. He said, but let's take care of nuclear proliferation first, and then we can talk. Not a joke. I was with MBZ in the Persian Gulf in Dubai to talk about Daesh, as they say, or, as we talk about it, ISIS. He had all of his national security people arrayed under this small tent in the evening on the Gulf, and I had my senior national security people with me. He looked at me and he said, before we begin, Mr. Vice President, can we talk about cancer? When I met with Xi last at Davos, the leader of China, can we talk about cancer? Ladies and gentlemen, it should not be for lack of resources or lack of cooperation that we fail to make progress. I think there's enormous opportunity. And it's my prayer that those of you who, like our honorees tonight, particularly some who are suffering themselves, they have one hope, that no one else's son, no one else's child, no one else's husband or wife will be felled by a disease that could have otherwise been postponed, made chronic disease, or cured. And there's no other room in this country, maybe no other room in the world that understands that as well as you do. I'm flattered to be in your company, and pray God that we will succeed. God bless you all. May God protect our troops. Thank you.